Welcome to This Explainer. Look, whether you first tackled Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird back in middle school, or maybe you've caught one of its many stage adaptations, we're jumping right into its enduring and, honestly, sometimes controversial legacy today. We're going to explore this through four distinct lenses: the literal context, a fascinating student perspective, its emotional story touch, and finally, its dramatic adaptations.
I mean, just think about this profound realization from young Scout Finch. It perfectly sets the stage for our deep dive into the heart of Macomb, Alabama. Through her innocent eyes, we get this beautifully simple, unifying philosophy, right? But that childishly wise perspective stands in complete, stark contrast to the deeply divided, racially charged reality of the adult world around her.
Okay, so here's the roadmap for This Explainer. We're going to trace the novel from its historical roots, analyze its strict social hierarchy, unpack that famous central metaphor, look at its leap to the stage and screen, and finally, grapple with its evolving modern legacy. First up, Section 1, the literal context. This is all about the fact behind the fiction, grounding the narrative in the harsh realities of the 1930s American South. You know, what's really fascinating here is how Harper Lee's own childhood directly shaped the fictional town of Macomb. She was born Nell Harper Lee in Monroeville, Alabama, and she grew up in this deeply racially charged atmosphere. The snobbery, the prejudices, the Southern values, all of that seeped directly into her narrative voice. She literally didn't have to invent the underlying tension of Macomb, she just had to look out her window.
And you can see how real-life history intersected with her fiction. The novel is set during the Great Depression, but look closely at 1931. That year marks the start of the Scottsboro Boys trial. That was a harrowing real-life event where 9 young black boys faced false allegations of rape, enduring a brutal 6-year legal ordeal. That historical injustice absolutely influenced the novel's central plot, with the trial of Tom Robinson.
Also, the iconic character of Atticus Finch. He wasn't just created in a vacuum. He was directly inspired by Lee's own father, Amasa Coleman Lee. Just like Atticus, Amasa was an Alabama lawyer who represented black defendants in a highly publicized criminal trial. So, Atticus's moral values, his sense of justice, that was all instilled in Harper Lee by her own family.
Moving right along to Section 2, a student perspective. Here we'll look at how Macomb's social hierarchy acts as this invisible, incredibly rigid ladder. Based on an insightful academic essay from Teen Inc., Macomb's society is just completely unbalanced. Your family name tragically dictates your fate. On the top rung, you've got families with background, like the Finches, immensely privileged, sure, but also burdened with upholding justice. Then the middle rung, the Ewells. They lack social grace and take drastically cruel measures just to maintain their fragile status. And at the absolute bottom rung, permanently, is the black population exemplified by the Robinsons, who were completely denied a fair trial simply because of race.
That student essay really hits the nail on the head, pointing out that all men are created equal, which is a sacred American creed, is exposed in the book as an idealistic raving. This tiered society forces us to confront a harsh truth. Equality was absolutely not a reality in Macomb. And honestly, this is why this matters to us as readers today. It forces us to look at the massive gap between ideals and reality.
That brings us to Section 3, the story touch. This is the emotional resonance and the moral center that has captivated audiences for over 60 years.
The entire moral weight of the whole shebang rests on this one central metaphor. Atticus tells his kids it's a sin to kill a mockingbird, right? Because they're harmless creatures that only sing to please others. In the narrative, the mockingbird is this incredibly powerful symbol for innocent people who are ultimately destroyed or threatened by the societal evils around them.
So who are the actual mockingbirds of the story? Well, first, there's Tom Robinson, an innocent man unjustly convicted whose death is a total defeat of justice. Second, Arthur Boo Radley, a misunderstood recluse who heroically steps in to save the kids. And finally, and this is absolutely crucial, think about Sheriff Heck Tate's choice at the end. He covers up Bob Ewell's death to protect Boo from the limelight. Tate realizes that dragging a shy hero into the public eye would literally be like killing a mockingbird. He chooses to avoid committing that sin.
All right, Section 4, dramatic adaptations. Let's see how a story so deeply rooted in internal monologue translates to the visual constraints of the stage and screen.
The 1962 Robert Mulligan film is a classic, for sure, but adaptation always inherently requires condensation. The film naturally had to cut out entire subplots. We don't see complex maternal figures like Aunt Alexandra. Mrs. Dubow's arc is drastically shortened,
and we never see Scout's classroom or Calpurnia's church. By stripping those elements away, the film focuses way more heavily on Atticus Finch as a hero, really narrowing the lens to themes of empathy and the law.
But it didn't stop in the 60s. Jump to 2018, and acclaimed writer Aaron Sorkin adapted the novel for Broadway. Starring Richard Thomas, this version absolutely broke box office records. Sorkin brought his signature smart, acerbic, dramatic flair to the story, which just goes to show that audiences are still incredibly hungry to watch Atticus Finch combat deeply entrenched racism live on stage.
Finally, Section 5, An Evolving Legacy. As time marches on, new publications and critical historical evaluations have definitely complicated how we view the text and its central hero.
You probably remember the shockwaves when the early manuscript Go Set a Watchman unexpectedly dropped in 2015. It features a 26-year-old scout returning home, but what really threw readers was the portrayal of Atticus. No longer just this flawless moral compass, this version of Atticus is far more complex and troubling to modern sensibilities. In this text, he complains about black drivers and actually attends meetings with groups opposing civil rights. It fundamentally challenged that heroic 1930s depiction we all grew up with.
Because of these evolving perspectives, the book faces modern challenges. For instance, a school board in Biloxi, Mississippi moved to remove the book from curriculums. Critics today point out that even in the original text, Atticus admits he's about as radical as Cotton Tom Heflin, who was a historical white supremacist. However, the overarching takeaway from historians and educators isn't that the book should be banned. Actually, they advocate for teaching the text impartially to encourage critical thinking. We shouldn't blindly hero worship Atticus. Instead, we need to critically examine him, his opponents, and the systemic issues of Macomb.
So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. How do we hold both the heroic, comforting image of Atticus Finch and the deeply uncomfortable realities of historical racism in our minds at the exact same time? I hope this explainer has deepened your understanding of Harper Lee's work, proving that it isn't just a relic of the past, but a living narrative that continues to challenge our conscience today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and thanks so much for joining me.